Hey, I'm Booger Boy, and I'm learning pixel art. So maybe 2 years ago, I was browsing the internet and I found this ferocious but adorable kitten, and I always wanted to turn it into pixel art, so today is the day. I'm using a pre-installed palette on Sprite called Radiant 15, or it's actually AAP-Radiant XV, but we'll call it Radiant 15 for short. I'm just using it to block in the main silhouette of this kitten and define some of the features on the inside, like the curves of the ear, or of course the eyes and things like that. And later on, I'll go in and I'll tweak it, but I'll show you how I did that because it's a pretty neat feature with Sprite. But before that, I want to talk about a problem that I cause for myself all the time, and kind of how I end up solving it every time as well. So I've got both of these browns are on the same layer, but often I'll want to move the eye, in this case, over a few pixels and kind of play with their positioning. But since they're on the same layer, I have to split them up. An easy way to do this is to hit W to bring up the magic wand, and then in Sprite you hit Control-Shift-J, which takes your selection, cuts it, and pastes it on a new layer. And then you want to return to the original layer and just color it back in with your base brown. And this is going to allow you to erase those details like you can see I'm doing here. You have to be on the right layer though, of course. You can erase details, move things around, and it just makes adjusting things at a really fine level a lot easier because you can make your adjustments and move on with your life instead of having to go back and recolor in the areas that you shifted over when you're making those adjustments. Using this technique allowed me to finish up the eyes, and now I'm using this lighter gray color on the layer beneath the eyes and those other kind of contour feature describing lines. I don't really know what else I'd call them at this point, but I can color indiscriminately on that base layer and really start to give this little kitten some form, right? You can define that mouth and define the lighter colored chest hair and these little tufts of hair above the eyes. And all this adds a little bit of extra detail, which I think really adds to the overall mood that this kitten is giving off. As I was adding a little bit more gray to the piece, it stopped looking like the reference and reminded me a lot of the owlbear cub from Baldur's Gate 3. And this was a direction I did not want to change. Like, I wanted to keep going this direction. Are you kidding me? Look at how freaking adorable yet ferocious this thing looks, especially once I added a little bit more detail and solidified a lot of the colors. And at this point, I'm getting ready to use the replace color feature, which I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So if you hit Shift R, you'll bring up this menu where you can choose a color that's in your piece, and then you can choose whatever color you want to replace it with. So it doesn't matter what layer they're on. I believe it also transfers with all the frames, and you can use the HSV sliders like you see I'm doing here to reduce the saturation of that like mid-tone. And then I'm going to pick this background color and also adjust the saturation and brightness to give the whole piece this kind of like washed out bleached look almost. Looking at it now, if I were to change one thing, it would be to make the eyes a little bit more saturated and those little highlights along the bottom rim of the eye. Maybe increase the value to just make them pop that much more from the piece. But once I cleaned up a little bit more about the piece, there was one final thing that I wanted to add. If you have watched any cartoons or anime growing up, you'll recognize this little abstract representation of a throbbing head vein. And my logic here was, oh, this little kitten is really angry. Let's give him this symbol of being angry. But then I was like, wait a minute, it would be so much cuter if we contrasted that with a little bow. So I was like, all right, let's put a teeny tiny bow on this cute little kitten's head and call it a day. So here is the finished piece. I added a few more details, but it's still really rough around the edges because I am a huge procrastinator and did not block out my time very well this week. And I'm sure that you've noticed that because this is not a scripted video like I normally do. I kind of just made this piece really quickly in about 20 minutes and I'm just doing the voiceover right now. So next week, hopefully I will be better with my time and I will be able to make you a better video. But for today, that's all I've got. Thanks for watching.